Welcome to Far East Wargaming, bringing you another Heresy Thursday. I'm Richard, and once again with me is Jason.
Hello, everyone.
So for this week, we're bringing you another army review, and this week we're doing the 9th Legion, the Blood Angels, the Sons of Sanguinius.
This has been actually a favorite army of mine going all the way back to third edition 40K. So I first played Blood Angels in the 40K realm all the way back then. Um, Now, disclaimer, just because I've played a lot of Blood Angels in 40K, I have not played a lot in 30K. I think between Rich and myself, we have maybe 4 or 5 games in with the Blood Angels between 1.0 and 2.0. So I'm making that disclaimer now in case we just brutalize one of the rules when we're doing our review, just so you know that yes, we have some familiarity, but we're not like long-time 30K Blood Angels players.
Yes, and our most recent battle report was one of the Blood Angels, so this is a quite fitting time to bring it. And it was fun to play against. Yeah, definitely a fun game.
It was a fun army to pilot. You know, that day of revelation, we'll talk about it in just a little bit, but it's a totally different play style than what you're used to, especially when I compare to like my Iron Hands and my Death Guard. So yeah, that was a really enjoyable one. But I also have to apologize to Paul because he was on the receiving end of some absolutely phenomenal dice on my part and atrocious on his.
Well, like with all of our Legion reviews, we always start with the Legion special rule. And for the Blood Angels, it's Encarmine Fury. And what that allows you to do, and the wording is pretty specific here, it allows you, on the turn you charge, to lower by 1 the result to wound to a minimum of 2+. And if you're a vehicle, you increase your ram strength by +1 to a maximum of 10. And this is an interesting wording here because it's lowering the required roll, not adding +1 to your wound roll.
That's correct. It's very specific because in 1.0 it was a strength bonus, if I recall correctly, for the Blood Angels. This is intentionally not a strength bonus, and it has its pros and its cons. From a negative perspective, obviously, you know, if you're strength 5, then that's going to be better when you're trying to do things like penetrate vehicles or something like this or whatnot. But actually, the wording of this rule, in my mind, makes it much more powerful in certain situations because let's say your tactical guys are going for against a Leviathan. Although why you would do that, I have no idea. Even if you went from strength 4 to strength 5, you still need 6s to wound, right? This actually gives you 5s to wound because instead of requiring a 6, it requires 1 less, and it's a 5 up. I think it's much more useful now. It's much more useful against other infantry. It's not as useful, of course, against things like vehicles. But yeah, I like it. And then don't forget that extra little bonus of the +1 to ram. I mean, ramming is actually sometimes useful now. And if you can get your ramming vehicle up to a strength 10 attack, then that actually has a 50% chance to glance or penetrate armor 14. So yeah, nifty little one and pretty easy to remember. Just remember it's when you charge. It is not when you are charged, and it cannot. It does also count even if it's disordered. So that's a unique wording as well because most of your charge-related bonuses don't go off if it's disordered.
Yeah, being able to go off every time you charge, regardless if it's disordered, is quite strong. And again, it's I think one of the stronger ones because of the number of times you'll use it. It's a very army-wide, very useful special rule, and especially because the Blood Angels themselves generally are very melee focused.
Absolutely. You always want to be attacking with the Blood Angels to get the maximum out of this Legion trait. It doesn't mean you can't make some shooty builds. Most Legions have that flexibility, but yes, this definitely means you want things like jump packs and, you know, the specialist units and whatnot really getting in there, but you'll see why also when we do the unit reviews.
So following on from their special rules, we have the Blood Angels Advance reaction. And this one's called the Wrath of Angels. And once again, it's a very strong one because, as we'll read, but it's an out-of-turn charge one.
Which is always powerful. I mean, if you look at the top tier of the Legion reactions, the one thing we come back to time and time again is anything that allows you to get off a card in the opponent's phase is really powerful. You get a 5-up Shrouded, which is fantastic. You know, if it's a unit that normally doesn't have an Apothecary or Primus Medicae or something like that. And then, yes, once that shooting attack is resolved, you can charge on in, following all the normal results and rules for charges. Very, very powerful. So much like the Space Wolves or the Imperial Fist or Emperor's Children, sometimes you need to be careful what you shoot at, and you may get more mileage out of actually being discretionary rather than just assuming that you can shoot every unit with abandon in the BA army.
Yes. So to be thorough, it happens during the opponent's shooting phase, and it happens after they have done all of their wounds and models have been removed, but does give you the 5+ shrouded special rule here for those shooting attacks. And if the charge is successful, it acts as a normal charge with all the bonuses in the assault phase. However, if the charge fails, there is no surge move made, so you actually don't move yourself potentially out of position.
That's correct. Yes, very specific wording on this one as well. You would get the benefit of the shrouded before you remove the models, actually. So, yeah, I like it. I like this one a lot. It didn't actually come up in our last game with the Blood Angels, but I think it actually was more of like this kind of threat in the background. Or maybe it did come up.
No, it did.
I think I might. It did actually. Yeah.
The one
Yeah.
Sun Killer. It got you out of position for his countercharge of his deep striking Eidolon.
That's right. I'm getting senile with old age. Yes, I remember that. Yeah, it actually was really useful that game. In some ways, it could have been game breaking, actually.
Yeah. Well, the fact is, if you run something like you did the Day of Revelations there, the jump packs, you're getting +2 to your charge distances. If you're anywhere within the 10 inches there, you've got a very good chance of getting the charge off, especially ignoring difficult terrain, but then having to take dangerous terrain checks.
Absolutely. Very good trait.
Well, so moving on to the Blood Angels Warlord traits, and we're getting back to a more standard assortment of traits here, where they do have 3. One is Loyalist specific, one is Traitor specific, and one is for either or here. And if we look at the Loyalist one, this is the first one here, and it's Encarmine Paladin.
Yeah, it's a pretty good one, actually. I like this one. So this is the Loyalist version. It's very similar in many ways to kind of like maybe one of the Night Lords or even the Iron Hand trait. But where it's significantly different is you gain Fear 1 as long as the enemy has the Traitor allegiance. And why wouldn't they if this is a Loyalist-only trait? Anytime the Warlord is on the winning side of a combat in which the Warlord was engaged and includes at least one enemy model with the Traitor allegiance, he gets +1 to his Fear special rule. So he doesn't actually have to be the one that wipes out the unit or lands the killing blow. He just needs to be part of the combat, essentially. And you can get him all the way up to Fear 4. And theoretically, he could go from 1 to 3 in a single turn, right? Like, let's say, for example, on your turn, you charge in, you kill something. Fear 2. Opponent's turn, they try to countercharge you something. They manage to lose. Warlord goes to Fear 3. So this is a really, really good one. And especially when you play something like, deep striking units, like we'll talk about in the Rites of War, the combination of night fighting and this Warlord trait, I mean, you could be debuffing somebody really, really massively.
Yes, especially with the pinning weapons you're using. The combination of lowering your leadership from the already fragile 8 to potentially 6 or lower there is... well, it's stacking the odds in your favor of getting favorable pinning checks or even just favorable assault rolls for winning combats.
Yes, and again, also the other benefit of this one is you get an additional assault phase reaction, which is pretty useful because you're going to be having a lot of assaulty type units. So being able to brace or overwatch, again, always useful. So yeah, I like this one. I took it when I build the army. If I don't take the others or any of the generics, this is probably my first choice.
Well, then the second, which is allegiance specific, is Paragon of Unity. And actually, this is, I think, an even stronger one because once again, it works on leadership, but it's got a larger application other than the Warlord. So what this says is any friendly unit made up of Legion Astartes Blood Angels that can draw line of sight to the Warlord with this trait, or any model in the unit he is joined or engaged in combat with, gains +1 to leadership characteristics to a maximum of 10. Now, that means there's potentially a huge distance and line of sight capabilities because of the fact it's anyone in the unit, or if you're engaged in combat with another unit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in drawing line of sight, I mean, that's going to be like if you do something like a deep strike assault, I mean, your units tend to be closer together to fulfill the rules of the assault. So a lot of units are going to be drawing line of sight. If you get off a multi-charge, multiple units are going to be involved in the combat, so therefore they're going to be able to take the benefit. It essentially nullifies the night fighting penalty, which is good. And if you don't have any night fighting, all of a sudden your basic sergeant and attack squad is leadership 9.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a good one as well. I still tend to rate Incarman Paladin just a little bit higher because the heavy hitting units of the Blood Angels tend to just destroy whatever they hit. But yeah, there's definitely use for this, and kind of perversely, there's even use for this in a shooty Blood Angel army list if you wanted to go that way, right? Because now all of a sudden your heavy support squads or something like this are less likely to break. And again, this one also is another one that gets an assault phase reaction. So yeah, good one. I like it.
Yeah, I actually rate this slightly higher, and the reason being because it applies to more of the army than the Incarmine Paladin. And as you said, the Blood Angels special units are the ones doing the assaults, tend to be so killy on their own that maybe Fear 1 or Fear 2 can help, but when we're getting to Fear 3 and Fear 4, I think it's getting kind of redundant. You're not really winning these fights normally by 1 or 2. You're winning them by more. More things are dying.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, and not to beat down the point too much, right? But I mean, where it really shines is things like you said, like pinning attacks and kind of preparing for the assault rather than the assault itself. And the reason why I personally rate it higher, and again, we each both have our opinions and our preferences, and that's perfectly fine. For me, the reason why I rate it higher is just because if you hit something and you're stuck in the middle with your deep strike, I mean, you just have the ability to affect perhaps, causing a chunk of the enemy's army to get pinned or break or something like this. I mean, I think that in and of itself is powerful, but either one of these traits, easily a really good choice.
Well, then finally, there's the last trait, the Traitor only trait. And though I find this very lore appropriate, I think compared to the other two, it is weaker. So what this allows is, well, what this allows is the wrong word, is what this requires is that the Warlord and his unit charge anything within 12 inches if they're eligible to do so. But if the charge is not disordered, they gain an extra 2 attacks instead of an extra 1. Not really sure if that's a good trade-off.
Yeah, I mean, this one reminds me of the World Eater's trait or any of the traits that say you must charge because a smart opponent can bait it out. Send something sacrificial, let you just kill it, or to either kill that unit and be stuck there with, your thumbs up your backside ready to get shot, or to just pull you off in a random direction aside from whatever you want to be doing. I agree with you. That's a pretty strong, downgrade. But then I also think to myself, what if you had a chaplain with 20-man assault squad on this Warlord trait? That's rocking a massive amount of attacks, re-rolling due to hatred. I don't think there's anything in the game that could actually probably stand up to that unit. So I do see some uses out of it, but I agree. I'm probably going to be going with the other two traits much more often. And besides, how many times do you play Traitor, Blood Angels? I mean, unless it's a thematic, or gentleman's agreement, you just don't see them that often.
Yes, that's true. You have to be kind of bloodthirsty, the vampiric side coming out in Thrall of the Red Thirst there, which is the name of this Warlord trait. And also the final thing for this Warlord trait, it gives an extra movement phase reaction. And as we've said, the movement phase reaction is one of the lesser desirable reactions in the pool of reactions here. But the funny thing is, out of all of these 3 traits, none of them have given the best phase reaction, which is the shooting phase.
True, but again, I mean, if you go back to the Legion trait and even the special units and whatnot, yes, a Blood Angel shooty army is possible, just like it is for any Legion. It's just not very attuned to their Legion trait and whatnot. So it doesn't surprise me that they didn't give them a shooting phase reaction. And I mean, you can always go to the generic Stoic Defender, which is very good. Should you decide you want to make one of those, and I've seen some shooty Blood Angel lists. I've seen 40 assault cannon lists. I've seen, guys dropping them in pods and just being in your face with massive amounts of DACA and the Angel's Tears with assault cannons. And you can do it. You can absolutely do it. It just doesn't synergize as well as an assaulty army.
I think one of the things we'll find with the Blood Angels is I don't think you design your list with versatility as you do with some of the other armies here. You have to really be picking the army for a certain purpose and honestly for a certain rite of war, which we're going to move into next.
Yes, the Day of Revelation. So this was a carryover from Horus Heresy 1. It did get some interesting tweaks. So the way that it works, and this is such a thematic and narrative rite of war, I love it. You must declare a turn from 2 to 4 as the Blood Angels player, and that's when your Deep Strike Assault comes in. Nice. If you want to wait until 4, go for it. But in the shorter games, probably not very smart. Everybody's coming in on turn 2. You place a marker. That marker, the second part of the way this works is it tweaks the Deep Striker rules where it basically says it has to be placed within 6 inches of that marker and doesn't scatter, which is really big. It basically means that your Deep Strike is coming in pretty much where you want it. There's nothing here that says you don't mishap, which is important. Anybody that tells you can't mishap, I don't see anywhere that this is written. So your second unit still theoretically, as part of a Deep Strike Assault, could have a mishap, but your first unit comes in on target. A smart opponent with a massive horde could probably mess with this as well, right? Because he could force a Deep Strike mishap because you can't get your units physically within the space of the marker. I don't see it happening that often. It didn't happen in our game, but hey, maybe if it has, put it in the comments. And then the last part of it is anything that can Deep Strike must. So all of your jump pack squads, your Contemptor and Candidates, your Javelins or your Proteus Speeders, anything that has Deep Strike must. But anything that doesn't have Deep Strike and starts on the table and not placed into reserves gets Fearless. So this is huge because in 1.0 it was much more restrictive. I think it said something like you couldn't take tanks or your tanks automatically had to be in reserve. I can't remember exactly what it was, but there's no such restriction on vehicles now. And any of your infantry units that don't have a Deep Strike capability that must start on the table, Fearless. That's big because then that reduces the risk of your table forces getting tabled, and therefore you automatically lose because you can't Deep Strike anything in. Very, very powerful, and it encourages you to take a lot of Deep Striking stuff. As far as limitations, and then I'll turn it over to you because I've droned on a little bit. Any of your HQ choices, they must have jump packs. Why wouldn't you? Not such a restriction. Any models that have the Deep Strike special rule must be assigned to the Deep Strike Assault. Again, we already talked about that. Not so much a restriction because you're going to take this list and maximize it, this rite of war. You're not going to just take 1 or 2 Deep Striking units. It's not very smart. And then finally, you cannot include any models with the Subterranean Assault special rule. Not too big of a deal. I mean, you're already coming in pretty reliably. Termites are very useful. Termites are also the way that the Termite Subterranean Assault rule is written. You can't shoot the guys getting out of it, which is a little interesting twist. But again, as far as restrictions go on a rite of war, none of those are massive. None. And this is a really powerful rite of war and so fun.
Yes, you have to build your force around it, but it does have its ups and downs. The placing of the marker has some versatility or ability to be saved, especially if you hoard that space, because you do get to place the first model down as close to the marker as you can get, or you can choose to place it anywhere on the table, but it does scatter. So you're not really losing too much by placing that marker, and some could say you could place it as a distraction and then risk the scatter coming into a standard Deep Strike. And if you've designed your list accordingly with some Vexillas and such, you could potentially re-roll those scatters. Well, you could re-roll those scatters and still be pretty accurate. But the major downside I find about this is for those horde armies, or especially if you're doing Day of Revelations and you're coming in, as Jason did when we did our battle report, with a very large number of troops, so a large number of units to Deep Strike. The requirement is to be 12 inches from the first unit, which kind of does just force you to conga line or really spread out the first unit that comes in so you have enough room on the battlefield to bring everybody in.
Which is true. I have a slightly different view on it because I don't think it's that much of a downside from a game perspective because, like, let's say you have a 15 or a 20-man blob of assault marines, make that your first unit down, and then to your point, you can conga line because of 2-inch coherency if you want to. You can abuse the rule and conga line out to like 40 inches. And now all of a sudden, not only are you adding a lot of space for the second, third, fourth, fifth units to come in next to that unit within 12 inches. Remember, it doesn't say within 12 inches of the first model of the first unit. It says of the first unit. You've got much more control of the table. By doing that conga line approach, you've got much more chances to pin as part of the deep strike assault. I think actually where this kind of gets a little bit wonky, as we saw in our game, it probably took me 30 minutes to deploy was it 7 or 8 units? I can't remember if it was 7 or 8. I think it was 8 units that deep struck in. It took me forever to actually place them down. I think that to me is the downside. I don't view the conga lining as too much of a downside, but it is a pretty gamey mechanic that apparently works as intended by GW.
Yes, it is basically like a separate deployment phase in turn 2 for most of the time. So it does take a bit of time to place all the models, figure out where you can fit everything. One major downside I see for this, and it's actually very Legion specific, is if you're going against some Legions very much like the Death Guard, where you've made everything difficult terrain. So even though it's a 1, it's still killing everything you come in on a 1. So you could lose quite a few models, especially when you're bringing in 15-man assault squads or even some of those 2-wound models with their jump packs there. You could lose them quite quickly.
Yeah, it does a wound. It doesn't kill the model outright. So you're right. 1 wound models will just die from the dangerous terrain checks coming in with the jump packs on the deep strike. What would really murder this rite of war is actually if your opponent has a lot of augury scanners and the free intercepts up to the maximum limit that you're actually allowed to have of reactions in the turn. Like if you're playing heavy support squads and you don't have an augury scanner, why? I mean, you want to ignore the night fight range penalty. You want to be able to intercept. Against certain armies, the Blood Angel player can't just expect to just deep strike wherever they want or they will get hosed down. But hey, it's rock, paper, scissors, right? Because against some other armies, all these dudes coming in out of deep strike and assaulting turn 1 is going to roll over them as well.
Yeah, I like the Rite of War just because of the composition it kind of forces on the Blood Angel player. And honestly, Assault Marines just look really good. So I'm a big fan of them, and I am building a whole bunch for my Dark Angels just because I love the models so much. I love the jump packs. And I'm just hoping, scale-wise, especially with the new ones, our jump packs still work.
Yep, agree. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm mixing and matching some Mark 6, the new Mark 3s, Assault Marine bits. I'm mixing and matching some. And yeah, I think we're still going to be able to make it work. But let's see. Well, let's talk about the second Rite of War, right? So Day of Sorrows. This one was borderline unusable in 1.0. I mean, the penalties and the benefits just didn't match up. And they've actually given it a well-needed tweak. It is much more usable now. So for the effects, you can take Crimson Paladins as non-compulsory troops, which is pretty big. And those Crimson Paladins gain line subtype, which is also really nice. So all of a sudden you're going to have a Suedo, Pride of the Legion, where you got troops as your Crimson Paladins and they gain the line. That's really, really attractive. All models in a detachment using it, with entirely of the infantry unit type and Legion Astartes Blood Angels, gain Stubborn when they're within 6 inches of an objective, which is nice. Stubborn is very useful. The last one is really interesting. When any unit made up entirely of models of the infantry type and Legion Astartes Blood Angel rule is reduced to 50% or less of its starting numbers, then the remaining models gain Heart of the Legion and Hatred Everything and Line. That's just absolutely insane. All of your infantry units, when below 50%, gain Hatred Everything, Line, and Heart of the Legion.
I think,
Terminators
yeah,
with that, crazy.
yeah,
Right?
it's not looking at the negatives just yet, the limitations of the Rite of War. That part of this Rite of War is what I think could potentially, with some very smart list design and some very tactical play in terms of what you sacrifice or where you place things to die, could turn around the games where line becomes a key portion for sector control, point control, or things like this. And it kind of encourages you to take, well, depending on the models, like either larger or smaller units, because to get 50% of a 5-man Terminator squad, it means you got to lose 3. So take 6, lose 3, and still have 3, kind of thing like this.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, just think about it this way. Combined with the second benefit, all infantry models are stubborn within 6 inches of an objective. You get knocked down to 50% strength. You gain Heart of the Legion, which is giving you a Feel No Pain or improving your existing Feel No Pain if you have it. You get Hatred, and you get Line. You get 4 essential special rules just for having an infantry unit at 50%. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, this might encourage you even to spam some small units, some MSUs, multiple small units is the abbreviation. Really, really powerful. And wow, such a big change from the 1.0 version of this. I didn't read this all the way through because I was just so locked into playing Day of Revelation, but now my mind is going, the wheels are turning about some lists I could make with this.
Yeah, well, there are limitations to it. It's not all upside. So one of the limitations is if in any combat that includes one or more characters subtypes with this Rite of War, the controlling player must issue and accept challenges in combat where applicable. So again, you generally do issue challenges, but there are times when you want to keep your character weapons for troop killing, and you don't wish to. So you do. It is a limitation. I wouldn't call it over the top. The second limitation is any unit made up of infantry or cavalry, as a special rule with part of this detachment, that's reduced to 50% or less must charge the closest enemy unit. So though you do gain the Heart of the Legion, the Hatred, and the Line subtype, you can be, as with the previous Warlord trait we talked about, pulled out of position with the mandatory requirement to charge.
True, very true. Where I see this really shining is, let's say you take a 10-man tac squad and you're babysitting an objective in the backfield. You almost kind of want it to get shot at, right? Because you just gain so many benefits out of it if you actually get it shot at. This does fit a more shooty style list with less jump packers, because the last restriction is you can't do deep strike assault, subterranean assault, flanking assault, and you can't have any reserves. So I guess this is one way to kind of encourage a bit of a more shooty list. I just don't think the downsides are that big, to be honest with you. Because anything that's up close and personal with the enemy is probably going to want to charge. No, I just think it's so strong, right? I mean, just name another Rite of War that grants 4 rules to an infantry unit. None. There's none, right? And then Crimson Paladins gaining line and troop. Yes, please.
Well, that's it. It's one of the gaining the line for your Legion-specific Terminators makes it a very strong one, because there are loads that give the access to troop slots for your Terminators or your special units within the Legion, but very few of them allow them to be scoring with the line subtype. Again, it's going to come down to list design and really list tailoring. And I think that's with everything to do with the Blood Angels. You're not honestly taking the standard Age of Darkness box and just running that as standard. You're not taking advantage of any of the Blood Angels special rules or tactics there by running something as simple and basic as that. You are building this here, this Day of Sorrows, around Crimson Paladins, potentially other Legion Terminators, or a very shooty gun line. The Day of Revelations is everything to do with deep striking jump packs and assault marines, despoilers and such. So,
yep.
Yeah, it's you have to be building these. And to be honest, it's probably not one of the cheaper legions monetary-wise to start assembling.
No, it's not. Oh, I mean, well, your basic guys, you can, of course, use the same basic guys as anybody else. You can cut some cost by using 40k Blood Angel bits. A lot of people have sold or are selling the Mini Marine old Blood Angel bits. So that part you can save some cash on, but you're absolutely right. Like all the other units are pretty much Forgeworld only. Crimson Paladins, and Angel's Tears, and Dwnbreakers, although I converted my Dwnbreakers out of plastic, pat myself on the back. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the Legion Contemptor, the 2 Legion Contemptors, one of which I think is out of production now, the Leviathan out of production, I believe. Yes, not cheap. Long answer, not cheap. Short answer, I like both these Rites of War. And compared to 1.0, they're both usable, whereas Day of Sorrows and 1.0 is just meh.
Well, then moving on, we'll look at the Armory of the Blood Angels. And they've got a nice selection here.
They do. As far as legions go, they get a lot more, I think, in their armory than some of the others. So starting with the Inferno Pistol, this is a Strength 8, AP1. It's only 6-inch range, but it does have Arbor Bay and Melta, but you basically have to be next to the tank in order to trigger that. But still, a Morathat can actually take 2 of these, which is just insane, popping off 12 of these shots. I mean, goodbye everything. Nice little upgrade. Is very short range, so a little bit trickier to use. They get Perdition weapons, and there's all 4 flavors: Blade of Perdition, Axe of Perdition, Spear of Perdition, Maul of Perdition, ranging from a +1 strength on the blade up to a +3 on the maul. So pretty similar actually to regular power weapons, with all of them being AP3 with the exception of the axe is AP2. So pretty standard in comparison to a power weapon, and they're only 5 points each for characters. Where they get nice is they all have Brutal 2, and we know how good Brutal is, right? The Blade of Perdition otherwise is exactly the same as a power sword, with the exception of being 2-handed and Brutal 2. The Axe of Perdition, exactly the same as a standard power axe, but I think it has an additional +1 strength, 2-handed, Brutal 2. Spear of Perdition has Reach 1, so that's going to help you with higher initiative. It is 2-handed, but Brutal 2. Maul of Perdition, 2-handed, Brutal 2. Really, really, really nice. The one that sticks out to me is going to be the axe. I've played with the spear. It's modeled WYSIWYG on the chaplain model that I have, but it has no way to get to AP2, and that's where it kind of meh. Your character is like a chaplain; they really want to be able to have access to AP2, so I think the Axe of Perdition is the play here, and it's basically a little mini Thunderhammer. Strength 6 only, both unwieldy, both Brutal 2, AP2. Yeah, that's a really, really nice one. So put the axe where you can, because it's not expensive, because none of these have a different points value. Finally, the last piece of kind of offensive equipment is the Elastius Pattern Assault Cannon. So if you're familiar with Imperial Fists, this is the exact same thing. 24-inch range, Strength 6, AP4, but it's Assault 4, Rending 6. It can malfunction, but only as part of a reaction. And apologies in the latest battle report, which you'll see, I got that rule right one time and I got it wrong, I think, the next. I missed it. So this thing is nasty when you can give 10 guys, right? Because, I mean, that's 40 shots, lots of chances to trigger rending. You don't have to worry about offensively malfunctioning anymore. Out of all the legions, I would say this and Imperial Fists are the ones that stick out the most to me as having the most useful options. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's just such a versatile weapon, and for so cheap. 10 points instead of a heavy flamer, and 20 points instead of the heavy flamer in a dreadnought or a vehicle there. It's cheap. Now, it is a heavy flamer exchange, not a flamer exchange. I think it used to be, so it is still a heavy support squad for this. But yeah, I'd never like to see them on. The Rending 6 comes into play more often than you'd think with an Assault 4 weapon.
Absolutely. And, my suggestion is don't spam these. I see a lot of people spam these things. I mean, I've even built a couple rhinos that have the Elastius Pattern Assault Cannons on them. But on a vehicle at 20 points on a 35-point rhino, probably not the best choice. Looks cool. Contemptors and Leviathans, yes, please. I mean, heavy flamers on those are just not good. And for a Leviathan, being able to stick them in the titty weapons, two Elastius pattern assault cannons, or for a Contemptor with two claws, you no longer need really to upgrade one of the claws to a offensive weapon unless you're looking for long range fire support. But if you're already going to take something like an Elastius pattern assault cannon, you might as well just take two claws and two you're going to take a Carries pattern assault cannon on a Contemptor, you might as well just take two claws and two Elastius pattern assault cannons, right? It's you're maintaining your hand to hand ability without so much of a downgrade in offensive firepower. I like this a lot, and my 10-man heavy support squad does some work. Angels tiers with these do some work, a lot of shots.
I do think that having this in the fists of Contemptors, really, you're not losing points on it, because the upgrade, I think, for carries, I think, is around 15 points. This, you're getting the brutal 3 claws and the carries inbuilt. Definitely worth it. The one thing I do want to swing back on is the Inferno Pistol, because in 1.0 this was the go-to Blood Angel weapon for a Moritat, but they've changed the chain fire rule for the Moritat, where not only does plasmas get hot, but Armorbane melters do get hot too. So they aren't as prolific or aren't as stable as they used to be for a Blood Angel's Moritat.
Yeah, it's a fair point. It's a good catch that you mentioned that changed the Moritat rules. So fair enough. I still will probably take my chances with them, or if I have the points, because it's basically a free switch. If you're going to buy a plasma pistol, go for the Inferno Pistol, I think, is the better play. Again, just coming back real quick to the Elastius Assault Cannon, just one of the point that I'd like to mention is I see a lot of people that want to stick these on their Predators. Like, I've seen some people that put two Sponsons with Elastius pattern assault cannons and a pintle mounted assault cannon, and then doing something different in the turret. Don't do that. Like, why would you, right? I mean, at 20 points a pop, you're taking what should be a cheap and cheerful Predator, which already can still do perfectly good damage with a standard, autocannon turret and las cannon sponsons or heavy bolter sponsons. You've now jacked the price of that thing up nearly double by throwing so many assault cannons on it. You're better off just buying multiple Predators, in my opinion. But yes, very, very nice weapon. Just be a little bit more choosy where you put it.
Yeah, I do like the base Predators, just because of their price, but they are very squishy. They're not as tanky as you think they are, and even in running them in squadrons, they die very fast to most heavy weapons.
Absolutely. I mean, and even my Rhinos, like when I was looking at my Rhinos, I'm like, 35-point Rhino, 5 points for a Searchlight, 5 points for a Dozer Blade, 20 points for the Assault Cannon. I think actually it's more than that, right? Because you have to pay for the Heavy Flamer, and then you exchange the Heavy Flamer for the Elastius Pattern Assault Cannon for another 20 points. All of a sudden, my little 35-point Rhino is now an 80-point plus vehicle that I'm actually a little bit more worried about getting shot off the board. So yeah, that's why I don't recommend just going crazy with these things, as appealing as that sounds.
Yes, that's right. I think the Heavy Flamer itself is 5 points, so you're looking at another 25 points on this. 35 to 45 to 70. It's it's no longer a cheap Rhino, and if it's a 10-man squad, it's nearly doubling the cost of your squad just to have that slightly shooty transport. I think on armies such as the Imperial Fists, where you're hitting on 2s with this weapon, has a bit more value. You get a bit more work out of it than you would from the Blood Angels, but still fun to have.
Agree. Yep, agree. And 70-point Rhino versus paying the 75 points for a stock Predator. I mean, come on.
Yes, and I will say about the malfunction, it's one of those rules where it's just kind of out of sequence for a shooting. So I do understand when people do forget that this Elastius Assault Cannon does get hot in reactions. So please forgive us for forgetting, because we did talk about it, but I think we never implemented it properly. there. But we will endeavor, I think you learn from your mistakes, we'll endeavor to do that the next time the Blood Angels are on the channel.
Yep.
Well, that's everything in the Armory, and now we're about to move on to, well, the units. And as with everything, we always start with the Primarch of the Legion. And this is Sanguinius, the Great Angel, the brightest one, Master of Hosts, Primarch of the Blood Angels, for 485 points.
And he's worth it. I mean, he's definitely a premier hand-to-hand Primarch with the weapon skill 8. The rest of his initiative 6, wounds, toughness, strength, and attacks all 6, leadership 10, save 2. So the weapon skill 8, he's one of the minority of Primarchs that have that. He comes with his Regalia Resplendent, which is just his armor, the Blade and Carmine, Infernus, his pistol, and frag grenades. He's got all the standard, pretty much, rules for a Primarch. He does have a special rule called Angelic Presence, Great Wings. He can Deep Strike, which is great. So now you can put him in a Day of Revelations like you should. And then he has the option to actually exchange the Blade and Carmine for the Spear of Telesto and the Moonsilver Blade, which we'll talk about why that's a good choice in just a minute. For his Warlord trait, he comes default with Sire of the Blood Angels, so all friendly models with Legion start as Blood Angels that deploy as part of a Deep Strike assault, or have a Legion Warhawk jump pack. So even the jump pack models that don't Deep Strike, they get +1 weapon skill on any turn in which they make a successful charge, not the first turn. Another important distinction. In addition, you get another Warlord reaction in the opponent movement phase as long as Sanguinius hasn't been removed. +1 weapon skill is huge because you're going to be charging constantly anyhow. So this just encourages you to take more of the jump packers like we've seen with the Day of Revelation. So a very useful force multiplying Warlord trait. I like that. Just very quickly going through a couple of his rules and his special war gear. The special rule Angelic Presence basically says that if you're locked in combat and you have a model within 6 inches of Sanguinius, you can add +1 to the wounds for purpose of resolving which side has won a combat. That's nice, a little buff. His armor, the Regalia Resplendent, 2+ armor save, 4+ invuln, and allows any failed invulnerable saves made on a turn in which he charges to be rerolled. So that's actually quite tanky. Rerolling your failed 4-ups, pretty good. That's like the equivalent, I think, of a 3-up invuln to start or something like this, or it's even better than a 3-up invuln. Great Wings, this basically is his equivalent of a jump pack, right? Allows him to do Deep Strike Assault. His movement can be set at a value of 14, regardless of the movement characters that's shown on his profile. He gains the benefits, such as the extra charge distance because of a movement 14. He can move over all types of terrain, pretty much. He cannot end an impassable terrain or within 1 inch of a model, obviously, that he's not part of. He does have to take dangerous terrain checks when employing this special rule and doing difficult and dangerous terrain. So pretty similar to a jump pack, but with some nice little tweaks to increase up to 14. He can still run when his wings have been activated. This makes him massively fast, right? Because initiative 6 plus this rule, he's moving 20 inches, kind of like Mortarion. But he, unfortunately, like Mortarion, he can't make shooting attacks or declare a charge in which he does that. Yeah, I like that. Really good. Super fast dude, but you probably still, like most Primarchs, don't want to run them on their own because they love catching las cannons to the face.
Yeah, the 14 characteristic is, I still don't think you're running him on his own, basically. Because, as we've said multiple times, Primarchs on their own are very vulnerable to just dying to shooting. So, even though he has a 14 characteristic, you're probably going to be using 12 because you'll be putting him with one of the units with a jump pack to add as ablative wounds for him. But when he charges, he hits hard.
Ooh, he hits super hard. I mean, he's got, we'll talk about the melee weapons in just a minute, but for shooting, he has the Infernus, which is a melted pistol, basically. But it has 18-inch range. It's Assault 2, and it does have Armor Bane, but he only gets 1 shot a game with it. Kind of balances it out, because an Assault 2, 18-inch melted pistol, wow, that's pretty good. His standard weapon, the Blade and Carmine, is only +1 strength, AP 2, but it has a lot of rules. Rage 2, Rampage 2, Murder Strike 5-up, Spread, Master Crafted. This thing will put out a ton of attacks, which is good. But I'm actually more in favor of exchanging for the Spear of Telesto and the Moonsilver Blade, because the Spear of Telesto is a Strength 10 weapon. It's AP 1, so it's a can opener. It has Lance, and it's master crafted. Lance drops the armor value of anything above 12 to 12, and it has Exoshock 4 up, which is multiple vehicles. Yeah, it just makes him a premier tank killer. And then he still has the Moonsilver Blade, which isn't quite as good as the Blade in Carmine. It's only user AP2. It does still have Master Crafted, but it does have Blind and Duelist Edge, and the Moonsilver rule, which says unsafe wounds against demons or psychers count as 2 wounds. They don't spill over to other models. And if you really want to, once per battle, you can throw his spear, although I don't know why you would do that, unless it's the last turn and you really want to try and kill a tank. 12-inch shooting attack, strength 10, AP1, assault 1, extra shock 4 up, instant death lance. I think the spear and the Moonsilver Blade are the better play, just because I like the flexibility of being able to go and kill high toughness or vehicles. You still have the Moonsilver Blade, which, although not as many attacks as the Blade in Carmine, will do perfectly fine in mulching infantry with his strength 6 and AP2. Yeah, I just think it's the better play, and it doesn't cost any points.
So I do agree that it's the better play for slightly different reasons, actually. Even though the Blade in Carmine gives you the Rampage and Rage, so these extra attacks on the turn you charge, kind of thing like this, it's still requiring to kill the multi-wound models. It's still requiring the Murder Strike 5+. And on Strength 6, you're generally hitting on 2s, so only some of those are going to be instant killing the model. But the Spear of Telesto is strength 10 AP1. So with your standard 6 attacks in a normal round there, you're still basically killing anything you want on 2s and 2s. So it's hit on 2s, or hit on 2s with his weapon skill of 8, and wounding on 2s, or murdering on 2s really, because of the strength 10. And that's getting past a lot of things, such as anything with battle hardened, with the... I think the only downside would be against things like Contemptors and Monstrous Creatures, where the Murder Strike would give multiple wounds there.
Yeah, I mean, this is true. Again, I mean, you can make a case for either one. I do think that Spear and Moonsilver Blade combo is just a bit stronger, in my opinion. And again, like we've already said a million times, you don't run this guy alone. And with the Legion trait of the Blood Angels, even a 15-man assault squad wounding Contemptors on 5 with a mountain of attacks. I mean, honestly, you're going to kill anything you point Sanguini and his unit at. It's just going to die one way or the other. But I do like your call out about ignoring things like Battle Hardened 1 or those rare models that have T5. He's still going to instant kill them.
How do you think he fares against the other Primarchs? Maybe more specifically, the Traitor Primarchs that we viewed.
Ooh, great question. I don't know. Maybe we need a separate podcast on this. I think a lot of it depends on the charge, right? Because he can re-roll his failed invulns if he charges.
Yeah.
So if he charges, all of a sudden he gets a lot more tanky, even against Ferrus Manus and his brutal Thunderhammer, extra brutal Thunderhammer, right? And against things like Conrad Kurz and his potential mountain of attacks. And we think that Conrad is also a beast, and Fulgrim is a beast. I think it depends on if he charges. If he charges, he probably outclasses a lot of people, but in a straight-up fight against Ferrus Manus, I think he still loses, because the high strength and brutal weapon that Ferrus swings is just, it's the great equalizer, right?
Yeah, it very much is. I think you're right. I think we will have to have a Primarch versus Primarch podcast. Maybe we do something where we bring the models in, we roll out a best of 3 kind of scenario for these guys. On the other side is Sanguinius will never go against Ferrus Manus because they're both loyalists. So that you'd never see them in combat. That's why I was seeing which one of the traitors might be more appropriate there. But I think it's definitely something we should do at Far East Wargaming here. We do have the majority of the models now, I believe, for these Primarchs.
We do, but yes, I mean, you're supposed to play Traitor versus Loyalist, but come on, we all tweak things just because we want to see our dudes get on the table. Right. So the matchup still could potentially come up. So I really think we should probably talk about all matchups. But yeah, I mean, he's still in my mind a top tier Primarch, but he gets that when he charges. He's probably lower top tier when he doesn't charge, in my opinion. But I haven't run any math on this. It's just kind of looking at the various rules and the way they work.
Well then, moving on from Sanguinius himself to the first Legion-specific Elite's choice, the Dwnbreaker Cohort. And this is a 5-man unit for 150 points with weapon skill 5 and 2 attacks as standard. And their war gear is the Falling Star pattern Power Sphere, grenade dischargers, both frag and crack, frag grenades, artificer armor, and Legion Warhawk jump packs. And their special rules are Furious Charge 1, and then the unit special rule, which is Set the Sky Aflame.
These things are a must take. I don't care which Rite of War, which Blood Angels army you're playing, it's a must take. I mean, they're criminally underpointed. And I say that as somebody who loves the Blood Angels and who just played a game with these guys. They are underpointed. I mean, come on. For only like, I think an additional 25 points versus something else that's 5-man elite type unit, you get the better weapons, you get the jump pack, you get artificer armor as standard, you get Furious Charge 1, which I actually forgot about in my game. You get the special rule Set the Fire Aflame, which allows them to debuff models when they deep strike -1 leadership on pinning checks, combined with Knight, combined with the Warlord trait with Fear. They have weapon skill 5, 2 wounds as standard, 2 attacks as standard with 3 on the champion. What's not to like about these guys, right? And that's why I mean that they're criminally underpointed when you compare these against similar elite choices or other elite choices in a lot of other legions. Extra models are only 25 points each. Not a big deal. You can exchange your spears for the Power Blade case, which would be like twin blades. I don't recommend it. I'll tell you why in just a moment. But if you want to do it, it's only 5 points each. The entire squad can take Melt-A-Bombs, which is cheap at 25 points for the full unit because you're probably going to run this as 10-man strong. If you want to, you can change your Falling Star Power Spear for a power weapon for free, which would be a downgrade. Don't do that unless you're trying to get an extra attack somehow, which you can't because they don't even have a grenade discharger is not a pistol, right? And you can take a Perdition weapon on the champion if you want for only 5 points, and that's really good because Perdition weapons are nice.
I think you are taking the Perdition weapon instead of the power weapon. There's no point in not doing it.
That's why I modeled it that way. Like my squad of 10 dudes, I converted them all over from the Sanguinary Guard minus the wings and with more appropriate 30K helmets and weapons and stuff. I equipped mine with 5 spears, 4 sets of blades, and then Perdition weapon on the champion. You could probably run the whole squad with spears if you wanted to keep it even cheaper. And the reason why the spears are so much better than the blades is the spears are strength +1 AP3, reach 1, so increasing your initiative, and they're rending 5 up, not a rending 6. So a squad of 10 guys of these on the charge is going to be spitting out something stupid like, 34 attacks with the opportunity to rend at a 5 up. And yet +1 strength and Blood Angels charging, you're wounding pretty much everything that's not toughness 6 or above on a 2. Where the case can be made, however, for mixing the weapons and doing the Power Blade case is it counts as you get an extra attack for 2 combat weapons, right? You can choose which profile you want to use. You can use the Sunrise Blade, which is Strength User AP3, Dread Sudden Strike 1, so initiative bonus once again. Or you can use the Sunset Blade, Strength User AP3, Rending 5 Sunder. That's why I kind of like to mix in the unit, because I have the ability to put out some extra attacks if I want. I have the Sunder if I want the Strength 5, with more opportunities to kind of go through Armor 10, Armor 11. Yeah, I mean, these things are just so good, and they just spit out so many attacks. And then finally the last shooting, which is the Grenade Discharger, Crack Bomb, range 12, strength 6, AP4, assault 1, so you have an opportunity to pop off against armor 12 and below, or shoot even a contemptor as you go in. frag bombs, which are really good against infantry. They're only strength 3, but it's assault 3 pinning. So you can pin stuff. And again, if you've got the Set the Sky Aflame, remember, which is a -1 leadership when taking pinning checks, you can pin stuff really easy when you come in and then just murder it with the mountain of attacks. Criminally underpointed unit, I will gladly take these at 250 stock, 275 with some melta bombs, 300 for 10 with a couple weapon upgrades. Yes, please.
Yes. The -1 only happens for the mandatory pinning check during the deep strike assault, not from the shooting in that phase. But with night fighting, you're already -1. And also, if you are putting in the character with fear, it's still very good to have those grenade discharges.
Yep, good call out. I speed read the first 2 sentences, totally ignoring the last part of the last sentence. So yes, very good.
I'm questioning a bit the Equinox Power Blade or the Power Blade case there, because though you do gain that 1 extra attack and the reroll to wound from Shred during the first turn for the Sunrise one, because the sudden strike really is like Reach 1 but only on the charge there. I don't see much of a point of the Sunset Blade, because your strength is only 4, and yes, you're rending 5+, but that doesn't really matter against vehicles. And Sunder just allows you to reroll, so you're still fishing for the 6s on rhinos, on rhino chassis, or 5s on rhino chassis, because I think it goes against the armor 10 at the back, but you're doing nothing to the bigger stuff.
Yeah, I hear you. Again, I think you can make a case to just leave everybody with spears, or spears plus a perdition blade. I just mixed in a little bit because I like the flexibility. And if I'm going to take casualties, then I'll just, again, I pick the blades first usually. I think again where the difference also comes is that if you're going against a big blob of something, an extra 5 to 10 attacks depending on how you equip your guys is useful.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. I think I lean more to the spears, and even if I had to rebuild my dudes, my existing Dwnbreakers, I'd probably rebuild them all purely as spears.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure GW do an FAQ and make spears suck. So.
Well, I know, touch wood here at Far East Wargaming, they stop doing too many ad hoc or knee-jerk reactions to the way people play things. I think the Heresy may be controversial to say this, but I think we're in a pretty decent place right now. Just give us more models.
I'm sorry, I like it better than 1.0. Not to say that 1.0 was bad, because I loved 1.0, but I actually am liking Heresy 2.0 better. But that is a topic for another day. We do need a balance update. We do need a couple tweaks and some FAQs, but we need to be careful what we wish for as well, that they don't come in and just make wholesale changes. All right, let's get on to the next unit, which is another elite, which is the Crimson Paladins, which is the BA specific blood Terminators. Weapon skill 5, which is always welcome. 2 wound models, like most Terminators. 2 attacks with 3 on the Exemplar. Leadership 10, which is really nice. For 145 points, you only get 3, one of which is the Exemplar, and they come each with a power weapon, a Coriolis pattern power shield, and Cataphracti armor. They do have a couple rules that normal Terminators don't have, of course, which is the blood is forever, and then stubborn instead of exhonorable. Additional models, you can take up to 7 more, taking them up to 10-man squad at 40 points piece, so not too overcosted. If you're 5 or less, you can take a Land Raider Proteus as a dedicated Spartan, or a unit of any size. You could take a Spartan versus the Proteus. You can exchange your power weapons for Sunset Blades, which we just talked about a minute ago, which is, it's an okay choice. Your better choice is, for every 5 models, you can get one guy with the Elastis pattern assault cannon, heavy flamer, plasma blaster. Take the assault cannon. Instead of power weapons, you can exchange them for power fists or chain fists. Probably a better play. Perdition weapon for free on the Crimson Exemplar, but he has to give up his power weapon and power shield. And then the Exemplar can take a harness for 10 points. So the way I've got this unit kitted out, I've got a 6-model squad. Of course, I've got the one obligatory assault cannon, because why not? It's cheap at only 10 points and adds a little bit of firepower. Of course, the Perdition weapon on the Exemplar. to get things like the Axe of Perdition, which is really, really nice. And then most of my guys are just, they're just doing regular Perdition, or excuse me, regular power weapons. I think I gave one of them a Chain Fist. I gave one a Banner in case I want to use these as a command squad. So yeah, some pretty nice options there. And then their special rule, the Blood is Forever. If they are locked with a unit that outnumbers them in combat, they get Feel No Pain 5-up, which is phenomenal. On a Terminator, if it's outnumbered by twice or more, they gain 4-up, which is also really, really nice. Just do keep in mind they count as bulky too, right? So a 5-man squad would need to be outnumbered by 11 models, right? For the more than twice for the 4-up Feel No Pain. Yeah, that's a twist, because in 1.0 this rule was actually much harder to trigger. Now it's a little bit easier to trigger to get the Feel No Pain 5-up at least. And then we already talked about a Sunset Blade, but the Coriolis pattern power shields, these are nice too, because these changed a little bit. I think in 1.0, if I'm not mistaken, they reduced the strength of the attack by 1. Instead of this, now it's reduced to wound rolls made against that target with the melee type weapon by -1. That's pretty good, right? Because even a Contemptor Claw is only going to wound you on a 3 instead of a 2.
Yeah, I think it's working better.
Yep, so a little bit more chance to survive. I like these guys. They got a much needed fix. You didn't see them as often in 1.0 because of just the way their rules. The rules were kind of overwhelming. They're pretty good now, pretty usable. Don't think they're as much of a must take as the Dwnbreakers, but you can find a spot for these. Even if you only take a 3-man squad at 145 points.
Yeah, I find them.
Spot for these.
Yeah, I find them a bit pricey because it is for a Legion specific Terminator squad. It is only a 3-man squad. Granted, it's coming at 145 points. I think it's kind of on par, maybe a tiny bit more expensive than other Legion-specific Terminators, and you still can round them up to the full 10-man squad, so there's no downside there in terms of the maximum size of the units. They're not restricted to 5. I think I do like the rule for the Coriolis pattern power shield. Reducing strength by -1 is nice, but it's just not as good as the other Terminator shields, which increase your invul save from a 4+ to a 3+. So I don't know. It's nice because I wish if everything was like that, if all of the Terminator shields did what the Coriolis pattern power shield is doing, then I think some of the other units might be more balanced. But when you have a shield already doing something better, it just feels a bit underwhelming that you've been given the lesser version.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that speaks more to the point of maybe the other Legion's special power shields are Imperial Fist, broken. Salamanders,
Broken.
broken, 3-up. Well, it's not the shield that makes them broken per se. Let me be careful how I say this. It's all the other abilities, rules, etc. that they have that all stacked together can make them a bit broken. But yeah, I agree with you. But a really, really nice unit. I mean, the models are gorgeous, and they form a basis of a lot of great conversions of regular command squads or characters or whatnot. I like them.
Just
definitely
don't forget that this running certain rites of wars, Feel No Pain 4-up can go to Feel No Pain 3-up because you get Heart of the Legion.
Yes, indeed.
So,
as well as mine, as well as well, you already get stubborn with these guys, so I can't brag about that. But yeah, these are very, very nice in a Day of Sorrows list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they're beneficial in a Day of Sorrows list. The versatility of them being able to come with a Land Raider or a Spartan as dedicated transports. And to be honest, you could take a Spartan here if you just need extra firepower, even with a 3-man squad. It doesn't say you need to have over the 5-man squad to take it. Means that you have some versatility in your list if you're lacking a bit of shooting here, or if you want to take a very HQ heavy unit in your Spartan for this. You can definitely do so. I like them, and the models do look beautiful. I will say this, even though I think they're slightly older sculpts, if I'm not mistaken.
No, they're not too bad. I think it was just before COVID. I mean, it was definitely less than 5 years ago, so I don't think they're that old. probably the only other point that I would make against him that's a minor beef. I don't know why they didn't give these guys the option to be a HQ retinue. I mean, the fluff right on the sidebar talks about how they guard the Primarch's halls, right? So to me, that might be a miss, but maybe they did it for balance purposes. I don't know. It would have been nice to be able to take him as a dedicated retinue, like most of the other Legion Terminators can be.
That is true. I didn't realize that they can't be taken as a dedicated retinue for these guys. Yeah, and I don't think any of the special characters list them specifically as retinue choices like some of the other Legion characters do, where these non-retinue units can suddenly become the retinue for that specific character. Yeah, so maybe a bit of a miss there for these Crimson Paladins. And I just I want to see some more on the table. Please bring some. I prefer to see these than some of your Angel's Tears or the Dwnbreaker Cohorts. I think these are probably a bit more manageable.
Yeah, cool models.
Well, then moving on to the last of the units in the book in terms of like the troop units. It's, well, the ones we've talked about on and off for this time. The Angel's Tears, 150 points for 5 models. Basic stat line, maybe with 2 attacks each. The big difference, they come as standard with a Volkite Serpenter and a Chainsword. Well, 2 Volkite Serpenters and a Chainsword. Rad Grenades, which is something I think we forgot about as well for this. Legion Warhawk Jump Packs, Power Armor, Frag Grenades, Crack Grenades. Their special rules are Counterattack 1, Stubborn, and Bitter Duty, so meaning they can't be joined by apothecaries and such. And then you can add up to 5 more for 20 points each. And I think the more important part is any model here can be upgraded with a Angel's Tears grenade launcher, which actually we didn't see at all in our game with the Blood Angels there, a Heavy Flamer for 5, or the Iliastus Assault Cannon for 10. But then what I think most people will put is the Rotor Cannon for free.
You can make a case for a lot of these weapons, right? So this is your ultimate glass cannon, probably Suicide Squad, right? You're going to take them full strength because why wouldn't you? Because you want to maximize the number of things like Iliastus assault cannons that you can take. Rotor cannon isn't necessarily a bad choice when spammed because you're trying to trigger the pinning, and depending on, again, is it night fight? Is your warlord nearby? Blah, 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 blah. So it's not a bad choice. Your Arch Erlin, the sergeant equivalent, gets a lot of different options. Heavy chain swords for everybody, including him. Power weapon if he wants it. Power fist at 20 points, which is on the pricey side. Single lightning claw at 10, which is more manageable. Thunder hammer at 25. I'm never a big fan of sticking thunder hammers on 1 wound models, but if you want to, you can. You can exchange 1 or both of the Volkite Serpentas for a quite reasonable 5 points each for plasma pistols to upgrade the shooting. And then you can give Artificer Armor to the Arch Erlin. And then if you do take the Angel's Tears grenade launchers, the way they work is they're range 24, strength 4, AP 4, assault 3, Radphage, and Fleshbane, which means that they are pumping out 3 shots that are wounding basically on 2s, and if you're still alive, you got to lower your toughness by 1 for the rest of the game. Pretty nice. I do think that they are a bit of a, again, a Suicide Squad, but the combination of stubborn and counterattack, the 2 attacks base with, technically the ability to get 3 because you come with 2 Volkite Serpenta and a Chainsword, and you only have to give up 1 Volkite Serpenta for any of those weapon options. These guys can also pump out a lot of attacks. So not only can they shoot, but they can attack pretty well. But again, as 1 wound models, anybody that knows what they can do is probably going to try and shoot these up. And even in our own last game with the Blood Angels, they were the subject of a pretty nasty interceptor reaction from a Plasma Deredeo, which wasn't so nice for the old Angels Tears, but hey, it is what it is.
Well,
just be
they're priority number 1 when they come on the board because of the amount of damage they can do in multiple phases, the shooting phase and the assault phase there. And so there are, I think, a quite big and relatively cheap distraction Carnifex.
Yeah, my point was just going to be just be careful when not going crazy on the weapon options, because they can get pricey pretty quick. Full-size squad, 250 with every dude with a rotor cannon. If 350. Artificer armor 360. So yeah, just be careful about not going into that trap. If you melt the bombs, we're now at 385 for 10 guys, and they all have 1 wound, right? But yes, you're right. They do have a lot of flexibility. They are a priority target. They are a distraction carnifex. I agree with that as well. I like them. I think my only complaint about this unit is actually the models themselves. For some reason, when Forgeworld made these models, they gave them the more skinny, old school thickness power armor Mark IV. So they just don't look good. They look skinny, like the first editions of Heresy models, 10 plus, 15 plus years ago, however long ago it was. Models are not so good. But there's lots of nice conversions you can do out of basic assault marines, or you can do out of the new plastic Mark 7. I've seen a lot of really good conversions of these. So yeah, nice unit, iconic. Probably the last point that I will make before we go on to the next unit is that all 3 of these choices so far are elite. Dwnbreakers, Crimson Paladins, Angels Tears. The elite slot is one of the most difficult ones, along with the heavy support slot. So just be cognizant of that. For flavor, if you're taking one of each of these, you've already used up 3 of your 4 slots, and you don't have any space for regular contemptors necessarily, apothecaries, like blah blah blah. So all 3 are elite choices. So just watch out for that, and just watch out for going crazy with the points upgrades.
Yeah, that's true. But for honestly, 250 points, 10 rotor cannon assault marines with rad grenades and chainswords, I think it's not a bad point straight off. I'd be interested to see how much damage they could do in a backline.
I don't know. One other thing that just comes to mind here, right, is because of the rad phage triggering and permanently lowering toughness by 1, right? Does that stack with the rad grenade?
We'd have to check.
I think it does.
Yeah, we'd have to check that, because rad grenades only do it when you're charged, right? I think it's when you're charged, not when you charge.
The first round of any combat.
Oh, first round of any combat, yeah. We'd have to actually look up rad phage.
That would actually be very amusing, right? You shoot somebody with the grenade launcher, you lower them down to T3, you charge in with rad grenades, they're T2, and all of a sudden getting instant killed by chainswords. That's kind of amusing. But I mean, the way wound allocation works, it's not like you're going to have multiple models in the same unit that are all going to be wounded down. But I don't know. I mean, soften up a contemptor before you go in, and then now all of a sudden that contemptor, because the rad grenades is only T5.
Rad phage is not stackable with rad grenades.
Okay, that's a shame.
Yeah.
Okay.
The effect is not cumulative with attacks using the rad phage special rule. With other attacks using the rad phage special rule, which is rad grenades. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
So they still interesting idea. If it would have been a bit gamey. Then, to be honest, everything's instant killing on strength 4.
Yeah, kind of amusing, but.
Well, look, that's the last of the elites in the book there. Now, because we talked about all these 3 being elites, now we have something that I think should be elite, which is in the fast attack slot. And it's the Legion-specific, very special Contemptor Incadius Dreadnought, which is basically a Dreadnought with a booster rocket in his backside.
I love this guy. I mean, it's so 40k yet 30k at the same time, and if you know what I mean, right? Like 40k is just so metal, kind of over the top. This guy's a little over the top, but thankfully the model is not. The other thing that this guy allows you to do is you can literally run a Fury of the Ancients list very easily with Blood Angels, with these guys in the fast attack slot, Daredevils, Leviathans, and heavy support, regular Contemptors in elite. So basically you take a single HQ choice and 2 min-sized troop squads, and there you go. You've got Fury of the Ancients if you want to be that guy. He's got a standard stat line of a Contemptor, so weapon skill, ballistic skill 5, strength, toughness 7, blah, 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 blah. He has 2 Talons of Perdition, which I'm not actually a huge fan of, which we'll explain in just a minute. Comes with a standard automatic deflector, and then he has the Incandius booster pack. He has no other special rules besides Legion of Stark as BA. Each of his Talons can replace the flamers with melta-guns or the Elastius assault cannons. Melta-guns are 10 points, Elastius assault cannons 15. That's actually cheaper than other walkers will pay for the Elastius, so why would you not do that? If you want to, you can change the Talons of Perdition with a Gravis Power Fist and inbuilt Heavy Flamer, allowing you to do the same weapon upgrade. So yes, that's the play, right? And the reason why is because the Talons of Perdition, they're strength users, so they're only strength 7 instead of strength 9. AP2, okay. Shred, okay. On the off chance you don't wound, you get to reroll it, but they're only brutal 2. I still think you want the regular fist with brutal 3. I'm sorry, it's just such a good weapon.
I agree with
As
you
far
there.
as, yeah, doesn't the Talons of Perdition, I mean, they look cool on the model. In use, they're very underwhelming. The last thing about the Incandius booster pack, you have two choices of the way you can use it. You can either use it to deep strike. So if you're playing Day of Revelation, here's your deep striking Contemptor equivalent that doesn't need a drop pod that you had to pay an extra however many points for. So that's nice. Shock Assault. So if you don't deep strike, you can activate it once per battle at the start of any movement phase. When you do that, all of a sudden he's a Contemptor that jumps 12 inches and gets the Hammer of Wrath 2 special rule for the duration of the turn. When it is active, you ignore other models and terrain. You cannot end an impassable terrain within another model. If you do go in difficult terrain, you take a dangerous terrain check. You cannot run while you use this. I think this is a phenomenal way to use it if you're not doing the deep striking right, because the movement 12 also gives you a +2 to your charge bonus. The Hammer of Wrath 2 gives you a couple extra free attacks at strength 7 that automatically hits. Yeah, I like it. And he's only 200 points. So even if you upgrade the Elastius Assault Cannons in both fists, he's only 230 points. And that's cheaper than a regular Contemptor with a drop pad. And, this guy's just better.
I think so too. I think that the fact that you get the slight discount on the Elastius assault cannons, you take a couple of these because fast attack is also one of these underutilized slots in the current metas, I believe, for most legions. Here you're dropping potentially 1 or 2 Contemptors in the back line for, hell, if you just leave it as standard, it's 200 points apiece. Normally you're dropping something slightly heavier, like a Leviathan with a drop pod into the back line, and that's dropping nearly 600 points just to put a walker in somebody's back line here. This could mess with someone's day very quickly, even if it's just all alone.
Yeah, it's maximum aggression. It's an extra attack with the 2 claws, so 5 on the charge. Yeah, I mean, I think he's just a very, very solid choice. If you were all going to take a Contemptor, why you wouldn't take him to free up that elite slot, as you mentioned. Again, the only reason in my mind you take a regular Contemptor is if you want access to things like the Gravis Melta Cannon or the Gravis Las Cannons, which admittedly are great choices. But if you're already planning an aggressive Contemptor build with 2 fists, why not take this guy and save the elite choice? The last point that I'll make from a modeling perspective is I've seen a lot of great conversions now that you have the plastic Contemptors available. You can very easily make your own little jump pack with nozzles look on the back, maybe magnetize that bad boy, and now all of a sudden you've got a model that can switch between Contemptor and Candius.
Yeah, the one thing I do say is the model looks beautiful, but you can get the torso of the Blood Angels Contemptor to put on the plastic marine there. The plastic body there. And if you convert something jump packy on the back for a Contemptor, it would work perfectly, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. So, nope, good choice. Love this model a lot. Very destructive, very distracting, very Blood Angels.
Well then, moving slightly out of the Black Books just to stay in the infantry side of things for the Blood Angels, they did get a new unit in the HQ slot in, I think it's called the Death of Canopus exemplary release. The Blood Angels Ophanim Court, which is a 3-man HQ command squad-esque unit.
Yes. These guys are not bad. From a fluff perspective, the Ophanim were like the internal secret police of the Blood Angels. Not so secret, actually. But the internal police of the Blood Angels, they were actually looking for people that were falling to the Black Rage or getting a little out of control. So that's what their purpose was. Um, they have artificer armor. They have fancy swords. They have the ability to take jump packs, but you can only take a squad of up to 5, which I think limits them just a little bit. They do have combat shields if they want, and blades of judgment, which their special weapon is a massive two-handed plus strength or plus 2 strength AP3 sword with rending 6 and murder strikes 6. Shadows of the Judgment rule gives them a model and a challenge, rerolls to wound, which is very, very nice, as well as plus 1 initiative and rending 4. That makes any model that challenges or involved in a challenge really nasty. There's a good chance they're going to strike first, and a very good chance they're going to kill whatever they actually attack. And maybe this is one of the reasons why they limited the squad to 5. I don't know. Most of the time, they're going to be AP3 when they're out of the challenge, because fishing for rending 6s is not so easy. They can get some different weapon options and whatnot. I don't know. I mean, I think they're nice. I think they're fluffy. Again, I've seen really useful conversions, and I think the rules are decent. I probably would just still take a Terminator command squad or even a standard command squad, just because you can get more models. And that's more attacks, and that's more things that benefit from things like hatred or whatever else, right? But yeah, pretty cool.
I agree. I think they're overcosted, to be honest. They're 3-man squad for 130, and then 40 for an additional model, and you can only add 2 of them here. 10 points for jump packs. A command squad is 85 points for 3 with 1 less attack and maybe some less special rules there. The Blade of Judgment, where I think we did a comparison before the podcast. It's similar to the Tyrannic Greatsword of the Dark Angels, but rending 6 instead of rending 5, with Murderous Strike 6 instead of Murderous Strike 5. So honestly, just a bit of a weaker weapon here. I think points can be spent better elsewhere.
I think so as well, right? I mean, again, I don't think it's unusable or a terrible unit. I just don't, unless I'm playing to the fluff or unless I want to show off my cool conversions, I'm probably, again, just taking Terminator or regular command squads versus these. But I like the models. I like the fluff. I do think they have a purpose. I guess is probably the way I describe my reaction.
Yeah,
they're not amazing. They're not terrible.
Very few of these exemplary units are game-breaking, or honestly, some of them just aren't useful. These are still on the borderline.
Yeah, agree. But I mean, the Blood Angels in 2.0 have a lot of choices. I mean, whether it's the special units, the Contemptor, this unit, there's no bad choices, right? And again, there's no like worthless choices just taking up space that you don't want to use. You can make a case, basically what I'm saying, for every single one of these units and not feel bad about taking it. I just don't think that this is a great one. Unless I'm missing something, and by all means, let us know in the comments if we miss some sort of weird interaction or combo or thought or whatever else about a Phantom. Let us know. I'm just not overwhelmed by these guys.
I'm actually just looking at the models themselves that they featured in the book and on Warhammer Community for these guys. I couldn't find them on the new Warhammer website. I'm just wondering, where did the bits, especially for their shields and bolt pistol, come from?
I don't know. I'll have to look at the picture. I mean, there are some 40k kits that do have combat shields. Maybe they've used some of those. Right? I'd have to go back and take a look at it.
It just doesn't look very familiar. But yes, again, nice unit. Nice to have the option of it. I think you're putting it in a thematic thing. The one thing is they can be a retinue. They are a HQ choice, but can never be the Warlord. But they can be a retinue for a HQ choice. So for a Master of the Legion, of course. So yeah, nice to have. Yeah, modeling.
Yeah, no dedicated transport options. 5 dudes that cost a lot of points.
Foot slugging it or jump packing it across the board. You're dropping
deep strike and get intercepted.
Yeah.
No.
But I think they do have, 2 wounds. So again, but still command squad-esque. There.
Yep.
Moving back to the Black Book, Liber Astartes, we're into the characters again, the HQ characters, and we start with Dominion Zephon for 185 points here.
Yeah, he's got kind of a weird cross of rules. He's got a very similar to a Praetor stat line with the weapon skill 6, ballistic skill 5, initiative 5, 4 attacks, leadership 10, which is fantastic. But his various war gear and rules kind of make him more of a Moritat. And he's got a mountain of these. So he's got Artificer Armor, the Spirits of Sanguis, which is actually his sword, Lament and Grief, which are his Serpenta pistols, and Iron Halo for the 4-up, Frag, Crack, Rad. Melta-Bombs is all his stock, so that's a lot of war gear as stock for 185 points, so that's nice, and of course a jump pack. For his various rules, he's got Independent Character, Relentless, Master Legion, Furious Charge 1, Bitter Duty, which means he cannot be joined by anything but Destroyers, or what was that, the Angel's Tears. Stubborn, Paragon of Restoration, and his Warlord Trait is Exarch of the High Host, and of course Loyalist only. So just real quickly about his Warlord trait, Exarch of the High Host. If he's the Warlord trait, then a Legion Destroyer squad may be part of his same HQ choice. So that's like his retinue, right? Doesn't use any sort of space, and destroyers are not bad these days with their various rules. They can put out a lot of attacks. Because it's a retinue, of course, they have to deploy together. You can't voluntarily leave them. Any Legion Destroyer assault squads gain the Chosen Warriors special rule, which allows them to, of course, do the challenge thing. If it's selected, and that unit, no other unit can actually be selected as his retinue if you want to do that. If the army is Dominion Zephon as the Warlord, then you get an addition reaction in the assault phase, which is pretty standard for the Blood Angels. For all the equipment he gets, he's great, right? But the Bitter Duty, meaning he's very limited on what you can stick him with, makes him a little bit more difficult to use. Paragon of Restoration means he has a 5-up Feel No Pain native, and then he has that little trick where the first time he dies on a 4-up, he's like put back on the table with a single wound. So he's a little tanky. And then his sword is +1 strength, AP2, kind of like a Paragon Blade, 2-handed Reaping Blow 1, Mastercrafted as default. And then his twin Volkite pistols, the Lament and Grief, both standard pretty much for a Volkite stat line, but they're pistol 3. It's a single weapon, or 2 separate weapons, so that means he's firing off 6 shots, potentially with Deflagrate and Blind. I mean, other than the fact that he has Bitter Duty, this guy would almost be a must-take, because at 185 points, that's just a lot of stuff that he gets. And to equip a similar Praetor anywhere near this, I mean, you're way over the 200, 225 mark. Yeah, I don't think he's a bad choice, actually. Even with the ability to only join, a Legion Destroyer assault squad, that's not a bad choice, because they have a lot of attacks. They have some weapon flexibility. I like him. I would build a list with him. Why not?
Yep, I think Destroyers are where you put him. You could put him with Angel Tears, but I don't think you're taking advantage, because you're not really trying to charge your Angel Tears into anything. If anything, you're using them to shoot and then get charged here. You really want to put Zephon on the charge.
Yeah, you do. And I mean, again, also, the Angel's Tears would be an elite slot plus him, so you're taking up 2 slots in your list, whereas him and the Destroyer Assault Squad as a retinue is only 1 slot, and you still have the freedom in the elites. He's got a lot of good weapons. He's a decent choice, right? He's a bit tanky. He has some decent shooting. I mean, I like him. I don't think he's bad at all. I would take him as a Warlord.
And you can have access to him because he's got for some, nice model. For me, he is the epitome of tactical rock. There with a massive aggressive pose, but springing off a 2-foot spike of rock in the ground here. I appreciate what they're trying to do with the model itself. I think I was listening to another podcast, and a very valid point was, why do Assault Marines need that extra foot to jump off with their massive jump packs.
Yes, and I think the other beef that some people had with the model was they think that the jetpack looks almost like a 40K Mark 7 jetpack, which I can actually see.
I can see
But
that too.
it's been stylized enough to look kind of unique. If you've read a lot of the Heresy novels, I mean, this guy is just awesome. And some of the conversations between him and who was it, Arkin Land, who basically built his bionics and all this kind of stuff. I don't know. I like him. I like him. Something different and a decent warlord choice. You can probably the only argument I would see some people having is where the other warlord traits are buffs or debuffs and affect multiple units. Him only being able to have a special retinue is not the greatest warlord trait, but I think at 185 points, yeah, he has a lot of value.
Yeah, as a quick side note, am I right in saying that the Land Raider is named after Archenland and not it being a walking raider? Like a land-based raider?
You are absolutely right. So for those of you that are fluff nuts, yes, Arkin Land is the creator of the Land Raider. I believe he's also the creator of the Land Speeder. And he also featured in many of the Heresy novels as a pretty interesting character. Yep.
Yeah. So a little bit of Heresy lore for our listeners there. I found that when I found that out, I found that quite interesting because it was very new to me there. I was putting the layman's terms to the vehicles here, and there was an actual underlying lore.
Indeed.
Well, the final character that we have for the Blood Angels, it's the Chapter Master himself, Ralderon, for 180 points.
He's another beast. He's up there close to Siggy and Sevatar territory, but he's not quite at their level. So he's got a Praetor stat line. He comes with Artificer Armor, the Encarmine Warblade, his special weapon, a Combi Flamer, Bolt Pistol, Iron Halo, Frag, and Crack Grenades. He has the special rules, of course, Blood Angel, Legion of Astartes, independent character, Relentless, Master of the Legion, Furious Charge 2, which is nice. And then his Warlord trait, Archine of Wisdom. And of course, he's Loyalist only. And for his Warlord trait, it basically says if he's selected as the Warlord, then he can select any Legion-specific Warlord trait from White Scars, Imperial Space Wolves, Ultramarines, Iron Hands, Raven Guard, and Salamanders. So basically, he can choose any Loyalist Warlord trait. Think about that for a second. That's pretty sick. But of course, you cannot pick a Warlord trait that requires the Traitor Allegiance, and you can't pick a Warlord trait that goes to a specific named character. The combination of being able to tailor the Warlord traits is pretty good, right? Because you get your standard bonus, your Legion rule of Legion of Astartes, Blood Angel, but then you can probably find some combinations with some of the other Loyalist Warlord traits that'll work well with him. That's where he shines, and then his weapon is pretty nice too. So it's Strength 1, AP 2. It's not unwieldy, so it's at initiative. It's mastercrafted, it has Shred, and it has Murder Strike 5 up. The mastercrafted Shred is just more opportunities to trigger the Murderous Strike 5 up. And then on the charge, because this is not a specialist weapon and he already has a bolt pistol, this dude's getting 6 attacks that are probably hitting on 3s, and he gets to reroll one of the misses, and he gets to reroll his failed wounds, and he gets to trigger Murderous Strike on a 5 up. He can kill a lot of stuff. Yeah, good choice. And that fact that you can pick so many different Warlord traits, I like it. Like, I haven't sat here and thought about which Warlord traits would be the most powerful with him. But that weapon he's got makes him a pretty good duelist. But again, he's not your Sigismund level, and he's probably not your Sevatar level, but he's up there. Well, let me just take a quick look. Let me see a Warlord trait that might be well for him.
For 180 points, to be honest, I think he's more worth it than Dominion Zephon at 185. His Encarmine Warblade is basically a souped-up Paragon blade, but with the advantage of you don't need to have 2 specialist weapons to get the extra attack here. And Mastercrafted for free, Shred for free. You're looking for a Murder Strike 5+. It's I do like this weapon. I do like the character a lot, and I think that his Warlord special rule, Warlord trait there, allows for those among us who like to find nasty little loopholes or just min-max a few things or create, honestly, a very unique way to play the Blood Angels, I think there might be some Easter eggs in these other Loyalist Warlord traits.
There's some stupid ones that I'm already looking at, right? All right, let's take a look at Space Wolves. Crownbreaker. The Warlord in all models in any unit he has joined gain the preferred enemy independent character special rule. I don't know, Raldoron with a big blob of something, all with preferred enemy independent characters. That's nice. Second part of the rule, they also get a Feel No Pain 5-up when locked in combat with one or more models with the independent character special rule. A duelist with that, really, really, really good. There's one combo. Heroes never die from the White Scars. The Warlord and any unit he's with gains Stubborn. Raldoron's at a 10, so he's a Stubborn 10. Now, you may argue that that's exactly the same thing as a Space Wolf Traitor, but that's not my point. My point is that we're combining the things with Blood Angels. I'm looking for interesting combinations. Not your game-breaking ones. I don't typically go down that road, but to each their own. I don't know. Imperial Fists. Next to an objective, Warlord of Inwit. Automatically passing morale or pinning checks. All right. This is also another way to get access to more of the shooting reactions. Right? Because some of the other legions have decent Warlord traits that allow an extra shooting reaction. So yeah, I agree with you. If I'm comparing Raldoron versus Zephon, I'm probably going to take Raldoron. But you could make a case for either one. You could make a case for a generic Blood Angels Praetor, kit it out as you like. But both of these characters, because of the points cost and what they get for those point costs, to me, just make them the better choice. And I see most Blood Angels armies that are using Raldoron, unless, they're going Day of Revelation and more jump packs.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think for Raldoron here, we have to look. I think there might be some Ultramarine ones that give you a "it will not die" or things like this that might that might be interesting on him for a Warlord trait. But yes, I think just it comes down to everything we've talked about for the Blood Angels. That you're not building a versatile is the wrong rule. You're not building a do everything list for the Blood Angels here. You're building something very tailored to a certain playstyle that honestly revolves around their 2 rites of wars. Because if you're not using those rites of wars, I feel you're underutilizing the Blood Angels themselves.
Yes, agree. I don't know. I think my overall takeaway from this Legion is it got a bit of an improvement from 1.0, which I think is great. That's my opinion. I think there's nothing in their special units or rights of war or characters which is bad, and some of it is quite good, as we discussed. Yeah, I like it. And that's one of the reasons why I've actually been excited to bust out our Blood Angels army and play some games. And then finally, I mean, the modeling and the painting kind of speaks for itself. You just see some really sick Blood Angels armies with tons of filigree and gold and marble. And I mean, you can just go to town on it. And I the one thing about this army, you can make a beautiful version using standard heavy metal type. And I've seen some really nice Grimdark Blood Angels too. So I like it. Big fan of this Legion. Very excited to be able to play them. And I think it's probably one of the few legions that everything is useful. Probably the other one is what? Imperial Fists?
Well, they're adding more and more to that every day, aren't they?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So, well, look, I think that really rounds up our review of the Blood Angels. One thing that a viewer did ask in a previous comment that I think we should maybe address for a quick second, and I think we touched on it earlier, is if you were looking to start a Blood Angels army right now, what would you buy?
What would I buy? That's a great question. I would still buy the starter box. Absolutely. But what I would do is I would either borrow, beg, or steal to try and get jump packs to convert them. Or I would, 3D printing, of course, is an option. I'm not a big 3D printer. That's my standard disclaimer. But if you are, no ill will to you, but I still think the standard box has value, right? Because if you're willing to source the jump packs, you can very easily make, take a box of the rotor cannon assault weapons, that box with the starter box plus your jump packs equals Angel's Tears, right? The Cataphracti Terminators. Yes, the Crimson Paladin models are beautiful, but throw on some fancy pads if you have access to the Forgeworld pads, a couple little pieces of decoration, maybe some different heads. Again, 3D printing or sourcing the shields from a place, you can easily convert up your own Crimson Paladins, right? So to me, I think the standard box still has a lot of value. And if you've converted the Crimson Paladins out of the standard Cataphracti, then of course you're going to use the Spartan model that comes with that. I don't see a reason not to buy the starter box. You're just going to have to put in a little bit more effort than some of the other legions, of course.
I think the starter box, the Age of Darkness starter box, is still very valid for starting a Blood Angels army. Mixing in some of the 40k parts, I think, is also doable if you're looking to make your own version of, I think, Dwnbreaker Cohorts or things like this. I think you're right. Angel Tears, Rotor Cannon, or act as Iliastus Assault Cannons for those Rotor Cannons there. Is a very easy conversion to do. The one thing is, for creating them into Assault Marines, to really take advantage of the Day of Revelations, the only solution we have right now from James' workshop is the very expensive blister pack of resin arms and chainswords. So maybe find another way to do that, and then you can convert your Mark 6s into Assault Marines instead of tactical squads.
Yeah, I agree with you. And perhaps let's take this as an idea for a podcast. Let's do a podcast where we talk about how to cut costs in Heresy. And I don't mean China cast, and I don't mean 3D printing. I mean, there's some very good, legitimate ways that I use all the time to cut costs. Just to the Blood Angels, let's do a specific example. So my Dwnbreakers are converted out of the Sanguinary Guard bodies, plus their plastic Mark IV jump packs. I don't like the wings. I don't think it fits the 30k aesthetic, but to each your own. I traded for some Grey Knight bits, the heads, which have more of that knightly look to them. Obviously, you don't use the ones with any of the, Inquisition, icons or anything like that. The spears from the Grey Knights. There's your, Falling Star spears or whatever they're called. Your 2 hand weapons, arms with swords from the Grey Knights. There you go. Axes. You can get the Axes of Perdition out of that Sanguinary Guard kit. I converted up my 10 Sanguinary Guard for easily 20 or 30% less than buying 2 boxes of the Forgeworld models. And I think they look better because the Forgeworld models, again, for some reason, they have the very skinny Mark IV aesthetic on them. You can do that quite cheaply. People are selling the mini marine bits from the 40k or giving them away or trading them away. People are doing that like crazy. You would be foolish not to acquire tons of those dirt cheap. Same thing for Space Wolves. Same thing for Thousand Suns. Same thing for Raven Guard. Even the, some of the Primaris kits that don't have the Primaris size bits and pads work perfectly fine. So I guess my long-winded answer to your simple question, and I apologize, listeners. Every legion can still get mileage out of the starter box. It's debatable whether the Blood Angels can get mileage out of absolutely as many things as the other legions, but you can get mileage out of it. So it's not a bad buy. I would actually say if you didn't get the box with the recent Mark IIIs and the Deredeo, that one's actually possibly a little bit less useful for Blood Angels, unless you're building a Day of Sorrows list, because Mark IIIs, which is standard jump packs, it doesn't always look right, because technically Mark IIIs were void assault armor. So if you're a fluff nut like me, you probably won't stick too many Mark IIIs with jump packs. But yeah, anyhow, that's the answer. You still buy the starter box. You're just going to have to work a little bit harder.
Yep. Well, look, let's pencil that in for another podcast on how we can make the Horus Heresy range a bit cheaper by not having to go to resin or just utilizing some bits from other ranges. From us at Far East Wargaming, thank you for tuning in to our review of the Blood Angels and this Heresy Thursday. If you've been here for the entire podcast, please leave some comments if you have questions or if you've missed anything. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. And of course, to help us with the YouTube algorithm, please like this video. But from me, Richard, this is all for today's review, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. As always, keep liking, subscribing, and all that stuff. It's been a pleasure. If you've stuck with us this long, add your comments. We will always address all those. Really enjoyed the time. We went a little bit long. But as always, we'll see you on the next one.